at the end too for questions and answers. I know you have your important officer elections, and so let me go ahead. I have some slides as well to share to help keep me on track as well. I always have to get used to a different computer. Yes. Is this Vista or this is why I always try to get here early and set up so that I don't have to go through this and make you guys suffer with me.
You're fine. We understand computer frogs.
Do you guys know where I click on my computer? That is what I'm looking for, so I can go to the flash drive. Okay. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
No problem.
Basically, I wanted to share some of my experiences as a dietitian, some of my career path in becoming a registered dietitian. I do remember sitting in this same classroom in clinical nutrition class. At that time, it was called diet therapy, and it has changed. It's a little bit more modernized than it was back then. And I remember thinking at the time that I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and what area I wanted to practice in dietetics. But as this quote illustrates, life is what happens when you're making other plans. I hope that by sharing some of my experiences, it'll reassure you that even with a few road bumps along the way, that dietetics and nutrition is a wonderful career path and full of a lot of amazing opportunities. And, oh, I'm sorry. Let's move that. There we go. You guys are being way too polite. Just motion.
Hey, we do it.
There you go. Even though I kind of stick to my notes so I don't go off tangent, I want this to be informal and definitely allow some time for questions and answers at the end. First of all, I didn't start out wanting to be a dietitian. I thought ever since ninth grade that I wanted to be a medical lab technologist, and so I pursued a bachelor's degree in biology from Baker University. And it wasn't until my senior year, between first and second semester, that I took an independent study in nutrition. Baker kind of required an interterm, what they called an interterm in between 3 out of the 4 years. And so actually went home from Atchison, so went home to my parents' house and kind of just totally immersed myself in that over the break. And my 2 brothers thought it would be really funny. They made a little recording of me and they were making fun, calling me Miss N, because I was so immersed in it and probably annoying them with trying to share all of this amazing knowledge that I was excited about. And so when I went back to campus and talked to my advisor, they could tell I really, really enjoyed it from the portfolio that I did on nutrition for that internship or that interterm. And so my advisor kind of encouraged me to look into the program here at K-State. And so I was really into exercise and nutrition. And so there was a research assistantship that was available during that time in the department, and it used to be called human nutrition. Then they changed it to foods and nutrition. And so I did end up coming to K-State to pursue that. And I was here about 2.5 years to get my master's degree. My dream job at that time was to work in a wellness facility as a dietitian. I really thought that was a nice fit for my interest in nutrition and exercise. And I had some conversations with someone in Wichita who actually had this dream facility that they were planning on building, and they wanted an RD, so they were already recruiting an RD for that position. But there was no real concrete promise as far as when this facility would actually be built. And I, needed a job. I think you guys can all relate by the time you get through and have all these student loans. The job is kind of paramount. So I didn't have time to wait for this building that supposedly was going to be built. One other little road bump that I had at that point was the fact that I was in the master's route and wasn't coordinated program. And so at that time, at least, it wasn't really highly promoted within some of the advisors in that department to get your RD. And I was kind of riding the fence on that issue myself, thinking I don't want to work in a hospital. I don't really think I want to be a clinical dietitian. I just want to do the wellness stuff. And that I did a little bit more research on it after graduating and found that a lot of doors were closed because I didn't have that credential. I did get a job offer as an extension agent in Kansas City, and that would have been great. It did require a master's degree, didn't require an RD. But the more research that I did, I just really decided that it was important for me to just keep on that path to getting my RD. And so I turned that job down, and after a horrendous interview, there were like 20 people in the room, so it was exciting to get the offer, but I ended up turning that down and decided to go ahead and pursue night courses for the requirements that I still had to make up. And this was before the time of distance education that you guys all have available to you. So I had to go to night school. I was kind of tired of Manhattan at that point. I was ready to be out of here, out of this setting at least. And then I moved to Topeka and went to Washburn, and I was taking things like advanced in psych and economics just to be able to satisfy all those academic requirements. Day jobs, I worked retail, worked at a Hallmark shop, and secretary for an insurance agent for about $5 an hour. So you can imagine how humbling that was with a master's degree. I never dreamt that I'd be doing that. But I also looked for opportunities to get my foot in the door, and did work as a diet aide at St. Francis, and also an office assistant for the FSD, the food service director at the time. And I, to this day, think that saved me on the management food service portion of the RD exam, because again, my route was the master's route, and so I didn't take all the management courses that are required in the coordinated program. So that really helped save my skin, I think, just being able to absorb some of that information through that. So it did kind of give me a little glimmer of hope that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and that I would soon begin to use my educational experience. Also at St. Francis, one of the dietitians went on maternity leave, so I got a chance to teach her weight management class for her. So those little things just kind of kept me encouraged. And then finally, I did satisfy all of the academic requirements and was ready to do my, what they called a qualifying work experience. That was with a master's degree, and I did that at Stormont Bell. And at that time, another dietitian went on maternity leave. Must have been something in the water in Topeka, so be careful if you're doing a practice there, or moving there, or whatever. But these pregnancies really helped me out, so I ended up covering for the dietitian in cardiac rehab there at Stormont. And then even when she returned, they had a full-time position that they offered to me. So I was there for a few years, worked nutrition support as a nutrition support dietitian. And then all these opportunities just kind of flew into my lap. They needed somebody with a master's degree to teach basic nutrition to nurses, and so I did that for both Washburn and Stormont School of Nursing. And that was an amazing way to review and refresh the basic nutrition that I kind of maybe forgot, during this time that I was fulfilling all of these academic requirements. So that really helped me to pass the RD exam as well, and it was a huge relief not to have to take it again. It was passing it the first time, so that was great. I also at Stormont got a chance to do media interviews. I think they ask the students a lot of times, if they've been on staff for a while, they've done those things, and so they're trying to create an experience for the students, and also maybe they're like, oh, okay, we'll let the student do it, or we'll let the new dietitian do it. But if you ever get those opportunities, definitely seize them, even though if you don't have any experience, it might be kind of scary. But getting to do television interviews, and also I wrote for the staff newsletter there at the hospital, and I really enjoyed that. When a position came open in PR for the beef industry, I was real interested in that and applied for that. And so that was just kind of a totally different change of direction from clinical, being a clinical dietitian. And I was ready for it after a few years in the hospital setting. But even though I always swore I didn't want to work in a hospital, I did learn a lot, and it was a great foundation for pretty much every position I've had since then. So keep an open mind with that, you'll learn a lot. And then with the Beef Council, I did a lot of traveling. I was still single at the time, so that was really nice to be able to do all the traveling throughout the United States, representing the Beef Council, doing trade shows, presentations, media, writing skills were utilized for that position as well. And then during that time, I also seized the opportunity to get involved in the State Dietetic Association and held offices there. So that was great for networking and developing some leadership skills. One of the other skills, maybe a unique skill that I picked up when I worked for the Beef Council, just out networking with beef producers. You were expected to learn to swing dance and all of that, and so of course that was good exercise too and fun. But it was during one of those outings that I actually met my future husband, and he happened to be a custom home builder here in Manhattan. So I ended up looking towards Manhattan as our wedding was approaching, and there happened to be a clinical position in the Department of HRIND at the time, Hotel, Restaurant, Institution Management, and Dietetics. I feel sorry for the people who answer the phone and had to say that. So I ended up teaching, coordinating what Amber gets to do now, and things have changed a lot since I had that position. At that time, I traveled around the state in the clinical facilities. We held class, kind of took turns holding class at the facilities that our students were placed at, and then sometimes they would travel back to campus. And that was, again, kind of before all the distance technology took off. So that was, I was newly married. That was okay to do all that traveling as well, and ending back up in Manhattan. And then some new additions, the Counseling Strategies course, they needed somebody to develop that course. It was a new addition to the curriculum, so I did that and really enjoyed doing that. And again, that has changed immensely with all the changes in nutrition care process and lots of additions to that class. And then during that time, Lafene Health Center, they had a dietitian who retired, and she was just part-time, and they approached our department here at HRIND and wanted somebody to teach that, and it just was a nice logical fit for somebody who's teaching counseling strategies and with clinical experience to do that. So I coordinated that and continue to do that today. And again, continued my involvement in the Kansas Dietetic Association. And then another addition was my daughter back in 1993, and you can imagine all this traveling. It was definitely full-time plus. Traveling, doing Lafene, and juggling all of that, plus my volunteer activities. So I really got to the feeling where I just felt like I was not an effective professional, and I couldn't be an effective parent as well. So that's when I decided, something's got to give if I'm going to retain my sanity and do the job that I wanted to do with everything. And so actually, this is my adopted niece here, and this is my daughter. She's now 15. So that was a big decision, and really worked well for me at the time. And that's one thing that I really liked about dietetics, is that it has been flexible, so that I could be a parent and can readjust priorities. And I continued at Lafene part-time at that point. And then I picked up some consultant hours at home care and hospice, just doing nutrition screenings on the weekends. I was able to take her in with me while I did that. I wouldn't do in-home visits with her, but the nutrition screens in the office were fine with a child in tow. And then I also did some PRN clinical hours at Mercy Regional. So you can see there's just so many things that you can do to kind of fit your lifestyle. Current happenings, again, Director of Nutrition Services, and that position went from part-time to full-time about the time my daughter went to kindergarten. And so I continue to do part-time nutrition counseling, so part of the time I'm one-on-one with patients and students here at K-State, and then the other part of that time I'm doing health promotion activities. And that includes advising the SNAC peer education group, and they're a wonderful group of students. So, and two of them, Laura and Cassie, are here. And you're not, I can't remember who's graduating. So they're both graduating. So that's why I passed around those brochures, because I'm losing some really awesome people and need to get some new blood there. So, and they'll answer any questions that you have on that as well. Then distance instructor has been the most recent thing. The counseling strategies distance version after Ronnie Schwartz left, been helping out with that as well. Some of my career highlights I've already touched on, just a variety of experiences and opportunities that are out there. Teaching and working with students has been a big portion of my career, and I really do enjoy that. Watching students hatch into full-fledged dietitians has just really been rewarding, and I bet Amber would attest to that as well. It's always neat to see that process happening. We used to call them baby dietitians, and we completed those requirements. So that, I know you would love that title. And then co-founding the SNAC Peer Educators was actually a student back in 2001 who wanted to do an honors project, and I had worked with her a little bit. She was really interested in body image and eating disorders awareness, and so we worked together to found that organization, and it's grown every year since. We also have an eating disorder team at K-State, and the physicians are really so busy that they just don't have, they have so many other things to put their time into. So most universities that I know of, it's the dietitian who's coordinating and the development of an eating disorder team. And so that has been a real interesting thing to do and rewarding. And then also just some of the outreach programs. Full of Ourselves is an after-school program that teaches positive body image and is an eating disorder prevention program, and I train the SNAC peers to go out and facilitate that. So we'll have some people, we're actually doing that at the Boys and Girls Club this summer. And this is some of the SNAC peers from a few years back, and we always have an Eating Disorder Awareness Week event, presentations throughout campus, just to educate on our mission, sensible nutrition and eating body image choices. And this is some of the current ones. See Laura, it's over there. And then this is the Full of Ourselves program, just some examples of the types of things that we do. This was the Full of Ourselves program at Woodrow Wilson. It's an after-school program, very interactive with 6th grade girls. And we have this life-size Barbie. We've had to recreate her several times because she gets so beat up. You can see her arm there. We kind of use that as an educational or a talking point, like, okay, that's a stress fracture from poor nutrition. Or if you really, do most women look like that, no. So the girls really kind of enjoy that. Some of the surprises along the way, recognized Young Dietitian of the Year. I won't tell you how long ago that was. And then a Peer Education Award as well. But really some of the fun surprises have been some really unexpected things. This was an example of a Dove campaign for Real Beauty. Have you guys heard of that before? This speaker here actually came to campus during National Eating Disorders Awareness Week one year. And that year, with the snack peers, we got really brave and decided to have our own rendition on campus. And so these are volunteers, volunteer students. A lot of them were snack peers and SHAPE peer educators. That's our sexual health awareness peer educators at Lafene. So never in my wildest dreams as a dietitian did I think that I would be overseeing a photo shoot of 18 people in their tidy whities. So that's kind of what we did with this. But it definitely got people to our guest speaker. We did talk about, we had some strict guidelines for adequate coverage, no thongs and such, and that's why some of the props are strategically placed to cover up some of the people who push the envelope a little bit. But we did have, we had to change some of our taglines. Real Women, Real Curves was part of that original Dove campaign, and since we wanted the guys to be involved too, we had to change that up a little bit. So we kind of nixed that line from our thing. And I do want to reassure you, if you were thinking about being a snack peer and that scared you off, don't worry, there's no pressure. We haven't done that campaign since then. You won't be forced to pose in your underwear. So. Some of the challenges that I know I've found as a dietitian, the information overload just seems to get more and more overwhelming, and I just love to feel up. There are so many areas in dietetics and nutrition that I'm interested in, among other things, and so to me it just gets very overwhelming trying to juggle all of that. The proliferation of nutrition experts that are out there, or so-called nutrition experts. You guys have probably talked about that in some of your classes. That can be really frustrating when you have worked so hard to get your degrees, and even family members won't listen to you. So that's something that I think will continue to be a challenge, but yet. Especially when you want evidence-based information to be out there and you can see all the harmful information that some people are putting out, but try to be positive and pull from those experiences. Dr. Oz is an example. I cringe because my mom talks about that show sometimes, and I'm always like, oh, there's some really questionable things on there. Be really careful, go to WebMD or something else, or go to a government website, but you can maybe think about what is the appeal that people are getting from watching that kind of stuff, maybe the visuals and things, and try to pull from it and use it to our benefit as RDs. The juggling act I've already mentioned, and learning to know your limits and say no. The RDs sometimes tend to be perfectionistic personalities, not everybody, but I'm kind of guilty of that. And so learning to know your limits and not get too overwhelmed. What is a new dietitian to do? Network, and you probably have that pounded into your brains in the program, but it is really important to get out there as much as you can and get involved, especially before you start having families. I know for me personally, I've kind of stepped back from my involvement with that because I feel like to be an effective mom again and balance everything else on my plate, step back and let some of the younger members get out there and add that enthusiasm and all of your skills. So get involved when you can, or as early as you can. And also, the respect that you have for those mentors, those preceptors that you interface with when you do your clinical or management facilities. I know some of you, are all of you coordinated program, or some of you, not all of you, some of you are you, some of you non-dietetics? Didactic. So everybody's dietetics, some SDA. But when you're in those situations, sometimes you've been in school so long, you're ready to get out there and conquer the world. You can, at least some students can kind of pass that attitude or that, give off that air that they don't want to or don't have anything to learn from the more experienced dietitians out there, and sometimes they may be doing things differently than what you learned is the right way in school. So be careful not to burn your bridges and respect that, and they should welcome your ideas as well and work with that, but just remember that they're going to be called, you may be calling on them to give you a recommendation someday, or you may be offered a job if you do a good job when you're there and have a good attitude. So the perfection monster, kind of mentioned that already. A quote that I really like, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," by Voltaire. And I constantly have to remind myself that too, things do not get done if they have to be done perfectly all the time, especially with all the things that we're asked to do with limited resources. We're just being asked to do more with less. There will be some dietitians out there who may be discouraging. I know that there were some students when I was in Amber's position who would come back and tell me that there were dietitians that hated their jobs in these facilities and just had a really negative attitude. And that's really unfortunate that that happens, especially if they're working with students. So, try to surround yourself with people who love what they're doing, and just know that maybe that dietitian's burnout and needs to maybe, enhance her skills and move to a different area of dietetics maybe, or maybe even retire if they're at that point. Don't let that discourage you, because there are lots of wonderful opportunities out there. So hopefully I've given you some confidence that there are, those great opportunities, and to reassure you that even with the road bumps along the way, to just hang in there, and the road can be tough when it seems like it's really long, but stick to your goals and you'll reach the finish line. I always like the quote, the race is not always to the quick, but to those who keep on running. So any questions about anything that I mentioned, or? Yeah.
You just mentioned so many changes that have happened. I found that really interesting.